Today I thought I'd take a look at the old Sega Master System, take a look at the console, play a bunch of games, and see what it's like to own one of these. This was Sega's 8-bit competitor to the NES, which is what I had. I've never known anybody who had a Master System here in the States, but as I understand it, they were quite successful in Europe and Brazil. The console is actually pretty cool looking, with this black and dark red aesthetic. It comes with both a card slot and a cartridge slot, and it also has this pointless diagram thing that tells you nothing. You'll notice that the pause button is on the console itself and not the controller, and it's the same exact shape as the reset button which is right next to it. This is what we call a horrible idea. On the back of the console you'll find the power and AV ports. It actually uses the same AC adapter and AV cables as the Model 1 Sega Genesis, and like the Genesis, this thing has a pretty poor video output, especially when using RF or composite. So I'll be using this Santa Claus adapter thing, which allows me to pull RGB from the console and convert it to S-Video that I can actually use on my CRT. I normally use it with my Genesis, but with an adapter it does work on Master System. Or at least it did until it went all blue on me when I had one game left to record. So one of the games in this video will be recorded with composite. See if you can tell which one! This is what a typical Master System game looks like, with a big plastic case. I really don't know what they were going for here. I guess they were big fans of clip art on graph paper. Wouldn't seem out of place on a children's math workbook. Inside, you'll find the cartridge, which are all pretty simple with this small red and black label that just tells you the name of the game without any artwork on them. The manuals are pretty straightforward as well, but one thing I liked about them is that they aren't black and white. They're black and white and blue. Of course, being in full color would have been nice, but you know, a lot better than just black and white. In addition to the cartridges, you've also got the Sega cards, which are the same thing outside of the fact that they're completely different. They come in much thinner cases which contain the card in this rubber sleeve thing. They're very similar to the cards used for the TurboGrafx. In fact, they're almost identical in size and shape. But sadly, you cannot play Bomberman 93 on Master System. The Master System box art is all quite special, as they really love the whole math workbook aesthetic. They look pretty stupid, but they do have their charm, at least for their earlier games. While they did always retain the graph paper look, they did eventually start adding more professional looking artwork to the boxes, which is nice, you know, generally a good idea to have your video games look like video games. The Master System controller looks like this, with just 2 buttons and a D-pad. There's a few other accessories too, like joysticks and light guns that I don't have. To put it nicely, I think this thing kinda sucks. I mean, the buttons have way too much travel, and while the D-pad is big, it's also very imprecise. Probably one of the worst pack-in controllers for any console I own. Thankfully, you can plug in a Sega Genesis controller and play with one of those instead, which pretty much instantly makes every game a lot more enjoyable, but unthankfully, there's a few games that don't respond properly to a Genesis controller, so for those games, you're just forced to suffer with this thing. In terms of hardware, the Master System compares well to the NES in many ways, because the Master System games usually have more color than NES games, but I generally don't care for the sound as much as the NES. There was a module made for FM sound, but only in Japan. And of course, the Master System was later repurposed into the portable Sega Game Gear, which is very close hardware-wise. They share a handful of the same games, and there was even an adapter that let you play Master System games on a Game Gear. And I do quite enjoy my Sega Game Gear, which is one of the main reasons why I bought my Master System a while back. But that's enough rambling about the hardware, now let's look at the games. I'm gonna quickly go over all the games I own for this thing, briefly talk about them, and then rate them on a 4-point scale based entirely on my own whims and how much I like them. So without further ado, let's get started. Starting off, we got Black Belt. This is a simple game where you kick people in the face so hard that they explode. It's actually pretty amusing. There is not a whole lot going on here, but it's fun. At the end of every level, you gotta fight the boss in a one-on-one fighting game style, and honestly, I didn't like these parts as much. But still, Black Belt is a decently fun game that's worth playing for at least a little while. Up next is The Ninja. Not just any ninja, the ninja. It plays like a vertical shooter where you run around shooting stuff at enemies. So you got one button for shooting straight up and another button for shooting in whatever direction you're facing. And if you push both buttons at once, you do a vanish move that lets you avoid damage for a few seconds. The game's a bit difficult to get used to at first, since it's really easy to die within 2 seconds of starting, but once you get into the groove of things, it's a lot of fun. Great game. Up next is Alex Kidd The Lost Stars, or as my cartridge calls it, Alex Kidd The Lost Star. I guess there's only one. Basically, this is a platformer starring what I suppose was the mascot of the console. It's a very basic game where most of the time you can just breeze forward without any thought whatsoever, because getting hit doesn't kill you, it just instead takes away a little bit from your timer and makes Alex scream like an idiot. So it's a pretty brainless game, but it plays decently enough and is very colorful. Up next is Penguin Land. This one is just weird. Basically, you're a penguin, and you need to get your egg to the bottom of the screen without breaking it. You can get rid of blocks in order to move the egg down, and the flashing white line shows how far the egg could fall without breaking. It's a pretty neat game, but it is pretty frustrating, because there's a lot of stuff that just wants to destroy your egg, and it's pretty easy to get stuck in a hopeless situation. It's a fun one to play with friends and then laugh at them when they do something wrong inevitably. The coolest part about this game is that it's got a built-in level editor, as well as a battery backup to save your levels. That's just awesome. You really didn't get that kind of stuff back then. So overall, it's a pretty good game. Up next we got Afterburner, which is a port of the classic Sega arcade game, where you fly an airplane around and shoot at stuff while avoiding enemy fire and doing barrel rolls. Quite frankly, this game's kind of a mess, and I can barely tell what's going on. The only way I was able to make any progress was just by mashing buttons and hoping for the best, because actually aiming at anything feels kinda awful, and when I die, most of the time I don't even know what killed me. Afterburner might be a true classic in the arcades, but I really did not enjoy this Master System version at all. Up next is Ghost House, a Sega card game, and the only one I own. It's a pretty basic game. Your goal is to run around and find a key, which is then used to open Dracula's coffin so that you can kill him. It's not bad, but my main complaint is that your punch attack kinda sucks. It's very short range and hard to kill anything with it outside of the weakest enemies. I mean, killing Dracula is very frustrating unless you can get the sword, which just kind of appears seemingly at random. So, not bad, but not great either. Up next we got Alien Syndrome, which is another classic Sega arcade game, where you go around shooting aliens and saving enough hostages to fight the boss. There's a lot of ports of this game on other consoles from the time, and honestly this is probably not one of the better ones, because the screen doesn't scroll and you don't get a choice of character. It also doesn't work properly with the Genesis controllers, and this game is an absolute nightmare to control with the Master System D-pad, so it's still a good game, but I kinda wish it was better. Up next we got Columns, which is a puzzle game that I suppose was Sega's answer to Tetris. I don't really know. It's pretty self-explanatory. You got blocks falling from the sky, and you match 3 in a row, and they go away. As far as puzzle games go, I do like Columns, but I don't love Columns. See, it's a fun game, but not one of my favorites. But still, this Master System version is pretty well featured, with several different game modes, and even several different themes that you can set for the background and the blocks. There's also a 2-player mode, which is a great addition. So overall, it's a good game, and not much else like it on the console, so there you go. Up next we have Quartet, named so for the 4 playable characters it doesn't have. It's a pretty straightforward game. You just jump and shoot your way to kill the boss and then exit the level. I don't really have a ton to say about this one other than I really like it. It's a really fun game with some great music, and it's even got a 2-player mode, so I don't really know what else to say here, other than it's great, and I like it. Up next, we got Space Harrier, which is another incredibly popular arcade game from its day. So how does the Master System version stack up? Well, it's playable, but only barely. As you can see, the game is not very smooth, and often everything just kind of looks like a giant mess of random pixels, but the game is still playable. Honestly, it plays kind of rough, but unlike Afterburner, I could actually tell how to aim at what I needed to, and when I died, I at least could tell what killed me. So I'm still not huge on this version of the game, but it's definitely not terrible. So if you were a Space Harrier fan in the 80s and you had this, then you probably would have liked it, but overall, not the most playable game out there. Next we got Altered Beast, another Sega arcade conversion. Right off the bat, you can see this game is not smooth at all. The gameplay and animation are both extremely sluggish, but it might have still been an alright game if it weren't for all the cheap hits that make it so hard to even beat the first level. See, the problem is that there's no post-hit invincibility, so when you get hurt, what usually happens is you get sent back into another enemy, who instantly hurts you again and sends you back into another enemy. And next thing you know, your entire life bar is dead and you're screaming like an idiot. So yeah, basically you get hit one time and that might be it. So if it weren't for that, it might be an okay game, but as it is, really did not like this. And up next we got Phantasy Star, the RPG that kicked off the long-running series. Simply put, this is one of the best 8-bit RPGs I've ever played. The graphics and music are great, the 3D dungeon effect looks amazing. The gameplay is also fun, very addicting, but keep in mind, this is still very much an 8-bit RPG, which means occasionally it's going to be unfair, and you're going to have to do some grinding. And you're also definitely going to want to break out some graph paper to draw out some maps. See, I tried going without it at first and got unbelievably hopelessly lost going through an early dungeon, so this game might not appeal to everybody, but if you have some patience, then it's absolutely still worth playing. Up next we have Casino Games. This is a game with casino games in it. After entering your name and getting your money, you have a choice of 3 different card games, as well as a slot machine, as well as pinball for some reason. There is not really a ton to say here, but the game actually does have a bit of personality, because you got a few different characters to face off against. And there's also this weird animation of a dinosaur running through a field that randomly plays during the game with no explanation. It's interesting. The card games play about as well as you'd expect, but the pinball game would have been better if the ball wasn't overly bouncy for some reason. Honestly, I tend to judge gambling video games less on the gameplay and more based on how cute the girls are, and in that aspect, this game does not disappoint. Otherwise, it's a decent game for what it is, but most people will probably not find it very interesting. Up next is Choplifter, one of the more beloved games on the Master System, where you fly a helicopter to free prisoners from buildings and then take them back to base. You gotta shoot the door open, wait for people to get on while avoiding enemy fire, and then take them back to base without dying, because if you die, then anyone who was boarded on your helicopter will also die, and if too many people die, then it's game over. Yeah, I liked it, but I kinda suck at it, and also I kinda got sick of having to backtrack to base repeatedly to drop people off, and then go back and find more people. But still, it's a good game, definitely a staple of the Master System library. Up next is Golvellius. This is like a weird mismatch of genres, because sometimes it's a side-scroller, sometimes it's a top-down game like Zelda, and sometimes it's an auto-scrolling top-down game, kind of like a space shooter without the space or the shooting. Basically, the main top-down sections have you killing enemies, earning money, going into caves to talk to people and buy stuff, and eventually you'll find caves where the gameplay changes and you gotta fight a boss. This one didn't immediately click for me, since your movement on the top-down sections feels very awkward at first, but eventually I got used to it, and when I did, I had a lot of fun, so give it a chance. It's a great game. Up next is Outrun, a port of one of the all-time classic Sega arcade games. It's a game where you just drive, and you gotta try to make it to the next checkpoint without crashing, all while listening to some great music. So I actually had this game on my Game Gear, which was a really good conversion, and I assumed that this version would be the same, but they're actually completely different. Unfortunately, this Master System version kind of leaves a lot to be desired, because the graphics, music, and controls all could have been better, but the main issue is just the game is really choppy, especially when the road bends up or down. It just doesn't look smooth at all, even compared to something like Rad Racer on the NES. So, still not a bad game, but I feel like it should have been way better. Up next we have Rastan, or Rastan, I don't know. Basically, you run around and just jump and stabbing things while not wearing a shirt. Pretty typical. The jumping in this game is really weird, since the laws of inertia don't apply here, because when you make a big jump, you only move forward for a little bit before you just stop dead in your tracks and fall straight down. It just defies all logic. There's also a lot of little things like that that annoy me about this game, like these spears that come out of the wall and stab you with no warning, or these enemies that you can only kill when ducking even though I'm clearly hitting them while standing. I think this game had potential to be great, but I don't think it quite got there. It's definitely not a bad game, but the controls are really stiff and it's not very satisfying to kill enemies. I know a lot of people like this one, but it wasn't for me. However, it does have tits in the instruction manual, so that's a plus. And up next we have an entry in the incredibly confusing Wonder Boy series. This one is Wonder Boy in Monsterland, not to be confused with Wonder Boy in Monster World, not to be confused with Adventure Island 2, to be confused with Bikuriman World, to be confused with Super Adventure Island for mobile phone, but not to be confused with Super Adventure Island on Super Nintendo, maybe to be confused with Sayuki World, or as my cartridge calls it, Super Wonder Boy Super Monster Land. Good grief. Anyway, this game has the dinkiest, tiniest graphics ever, but don't be fooled, because this game is really good. Basically, your goal is to get to the end of the level and kill the boss, but what makes it interesting are the light RPG elements, because when you kill enemies, they drop money, which can be used to buy equipment and stuff, and since it's a linear game where you probably won't have enough money to buy everything, this leads to some fun choices you gotta make. Do you want to buy a shield so you can better protect yourself? Or do you want to spend that money on some boots that'll make you jump better? You can also find some other NPCs to talk to, like this guy who gives you valuable advice such as, "I think there is a store sells armor." How profound. If I can make one complaint about this game, the sound that plays when you're low on health is absolutely dreadful. Otherwise, I love this game, and I think you should play it. Finally, we have Wonder Boy 3, The Dragon's Trap, not to be confused with Wonder Boy 3, Monster Lair, not to be confused with Adventure Island 3, not to be confused with Wampum, to be confused with Dragon's Curse. Whatever. This is another amazing game, because the core gameplay and RPG elements remain, but unlike the last one where you just had to get to the end of the level, this one's less linear and lets you explore around. You also transform into different creatures as the game progresses, each with different abilities that will let you get into places that were previously inaccessible. It's a very fun game with some great graphics and music. Honestly, I'd go as far as to say that if this was an NES game, then it would be talked about in the same breath as classics like Metroid and Contra. This one is another must-have. So those are all the American games I own, but now I want to take a look at a few later games from Europe, where the console was still getting games due to its continued popularity and the Game Gear's existence making ports easy. Amazingly enough, they'll actually play just fine on my US console. There's also a bunch of Brazilian games too, but I don't have any of those. Typically for the European games, the manual will be in a horizontal orientation rather than vertical, with each page having one sentence repeated in about 1,000 different languages. The American games for the most part will instead have a typical vertical orientation and are only in one language. Anyway, we'll start off with Bobble, a game that needs no introduction. It's just a very happy game where you go around the screen shooting bubbles at enemies and then popping them to kill them and turn them into ice cream or something. Compared to the more popular NES version, this Master System version has slightly better graphics, but the music is kind of ear-splitting. But still, it's a great game, has a 2-player mode, and definitely worth picking up if you can find it somewhere. Up next, we have Sonic 2, which is completely different from the Genesis Sonic 2, and is probably best known as that one Sonic game where Tails dies if you don't get all the emeralds. This is one that I first played on Game Gear, and honestly I hated it there, because unlike Sonic 1, the game was not optimized for the small screen size, and it was almost impossible to even beat the first boss. But thankfully, this is not a problem on the Master System version, and I actually quite enjoyed it here. Controls are very good, and the speed is fast. The level design is occasionally a bit on the cheap side, but overall, I still think it's a great game, and has some pretty neat ideas in it. So, not perfect, but still a great game. I think fans of Sonic should check this one out. And last, but absolutely not least, we have Land of Illusion starring Mickey Mouse. This is another game that I was familiar with from playing it on Game Gear, and it's just an absolutely fantastic game. It's a platformer with some great graphics and great control, but there's more to it than just getting to the end of the level, because oftentimes, when you beat a level, it'll alter previous levels, or give you a new ability that lets you reach previously inaccessible areas. So it reminds me a lot of Wario Land 3 in that aspect, or maybe the kids these days would say it's almost like a Metroidvania. But it's a really great game, and if you got a Master System or a Game Gear, then it's a must-own. My only complaint with it is that there's no password or save feature in the game. You gotta play the whole thing in one sitting, which is unfortunate because the game is somewhat long, but otherwise, it's absolutely fantastic. So yeah, those are all the Master System games that I own. Some of them are great, some of them are bad, and a lot of them are somewhere in between. What I will say is that honestly a lot of the major Sega arcade ports were kind of disappointing, but overall I had fun. So if I had to give a top 5, I'd probably say, in no particular order, Golvellius, Phantasy Star, Quartet, Land of Illusion, and Wonder Boy and Monsterland. Either way, there's some pretty cool games on the Master System, and a lot of them are very different from what you get on NES, so it's a nice one to check out if you're like me and grew up on the Nintendo.